Welcome back, you main eventers. Today we have a very special one in store for you. But first, we are about to hit a milestone of 1,000 subscribers. If you're not subscribed, hit that button and go from a jobber to a main eventer. Okay, enough of that stuff. Let's get into it. 2002. What a year it was. Spider-Man was the biggest film of the year, but if you were a wrestling fan back in those days and turned on the TV, there weren't many options. It has been a year since the WWE had bought the WCW and left the fans with no real alternatives. Gone were the days of the territories. Gone were the days of the Monday Night Wars. The WWE had reigned supreme. We had pervy Rob Feinstein start ROH this year because he didn't want to miss out on his bread and butter, which was selling wrestling tapes. And down south we had good old slapnuts Jeff Jarrett sitting on a boat with his father, pondering his future in professional wrestling. As the legend goes, the WWE failed to recognize that Jeff Jarrett's contract was expiring. Jarrett was still the Intercontinental Champion when his contract was up. He allegedly used this mishap for a quick payday, blackmailing the WWE for $300,000. If they didn't pay him, he was going to show up with the belt on Nitro. He did finally agree to drop the championship to China. So when Vince McMahon bought the WCW, he was not going to be bringing Jeff Jarrett back to the WWE. And what resulted from this fishing trip would be the WWE's biggest competition since the WCW, and that's NWA TNA. Now, the early years in NWA TNA, which is known as the Asylum years, were absolute insanity. It was really like the Attitude Era on steroids. Now, NWA TNA started out as weekly pay-per-views, so they could get away with a lot more than what would fly on a television network. In the very first pay-per-view, we are introduced to the Johnsons. Yes, you are looking at this right. Two big buff guys whose gimmicks were to look like dicks. I don't know who came up with this idea, but this is funny. Then there are the Rainbow Express, whose gimmicks is just that they were gay. If you were younger, you might be really pissed at this, but most wrestling promotions did this. WCW was boycotted, WWE did this with Billy and Chuck, and it's currently done all the time in Mexico. One of the best parts of this gimmick is when Bruce wins Miss TNA and starts wrestling women. They have girls dancing in cages. All this just screams early 2000s behavior. And let's be honest, here in the early days, there's not much of a women's division. They have Bruce, who's wrestling women, and a battle royale with a bunch of ladies in their pajamas. It's a long way from the knockouts division that would come in the future. In the very first episode, we get some familiar faces from the ECW, but it doesn't really evolve into anything. Most of them aren't even on the next episodes. This was just really a launching point for Bruce's reign of terror. R-Truth is Ron the Truth Killings at the time, and he is a prototype for a 2016 social justice warrior. He gets a lot of heat telling the Southerners how racist they are, and the systemic racism in wrestling. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat comes out and gives him a title shot just because he knows what it's like to be a minority. They were really going all in on this angle. Jeff Jarrett comes out and says he hasn't gotten his title shot due to reverse racism. You can't make this stuff up. I am convinced that our political landscape here in the US is just a big wrestling angle from the 2000s. At some point, Jeff Jarrett is just going to show up to the White House and hit everyone with his guitar. We also have Disco Inferno running around telling Goldilocks that the only reason she is here is because she's a dumb blonde and she needs to show her boobs. One of the best things to happen in the very first pay-per-view is the fake Scott Steiner. What the hell is this? It is even better because Rick Steiner is in the match with him. The dog-faced gremlin doesn't even acknowledge his existence. I mean, come on, Rick. You should have refused to do this or pretended this was your younger brother. I mean, they even copied him from his hair down to a Superman symbol on his trunks. Oh man, and we can't forget about Psycho Dwarf. He runs around shooting promos all about how he wants to shed midget blood. He shows up week after week terrorizing Goldilocks and explaining his deep-rooted need to beat up dwarfs. And his best moment comes when he's having issues with Jeff Jarrett and pulls out a gun to even the odds. Man, they were lucky they were on pay-per-view. The tag team division is where their insanity really shined. Besides the Johnsons and the Rainbow Express, we had the Flying Elvises, who actually weren't bad wrestlers. Their gimmick was just really stupid. But the Dupps take the cake. Their gimmick is that they were inbred hillbillies and currently dating their cousin. What is this? No wonder why TNA had an issue with keeping investors. Not many people would have wanted to throw their money at this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all of early TNA was bad. They were able to capture the same magic that WCW had with their cruiserweight division in the X division. The X division is full of up-and-comers of the time. AJ Styles was out here showcasing why he was the phenomenal one. He was putting on some outstanding matches. So much so they gave him a small title run in the early days. It didn't amount to much as it was short-lived because this was during Jeff Jarrett's reign of terror. Low-key was also really good here in TNA. You can tell by the crowd's reaction that he was really over. Also, Jerry Lynn was doing great and had a lot of really good matches with AJ Styles. When the Cruiserweight division made it over to the WWE, I feel like they never used them properly. And I'm not talking about Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio. I'm talking about when the belt came over and the Cruiserweight title meant nothing. You would see the Hurricane wrestle Crash Holly and you would literally care less about it. Even when they brought back 205 Live, no one really cared about it. WCW was able to do something special and early TNA did the same. Honestly, during the Asylum years, the X Division meant more than the world title. There was a little build-up to Jeff Jarrett getting the belt, and once he had it, it was a never-ending ref bumps and guitar hits. I see why Cody smashed the throne as a symbolism for booking himself above everyone else. Early TNA shows why booking yourself into a championship run is bad for business. The Jeff Jarrett run is just terrible. Way worse than Triple H's reign of terror. He buries AJ Styles, R-Truth, and a bunch of others who had potential. Then he booked Brian Lawler as a top guy. I get it, the Jarretts and the Lawlers are big in Tennessee where the Asylum years took place. Actually took place in the Tennessee Fairgrounds. But a national audience, even their local audience, didn't seem too keen on these two being top guys. Early TNA had such a roster of talent that it was a shame that all of them had to take a backseat to Jeff Jarrett and his ego. And they would give some of them just real stupid gimmicks. No wonder why, when they actually got new investors, they put an end to the reign of terror. They knew Jeff didn't put butts in seats. So, in my honest opinion, if I would recommend you all watch the Asylum years, honestly I would have to say yes. Whether you watch wrestling to be entertained or for good wrestling, you will get both of it here. There would be parts that I would watch and I would say to myself, what the heck is going on here? Or who the heck came up with this idea? Then you had some of the great wrestling from the X Division. If you were a fan of the Attitude Era storylines and dramatics and high-flying and technical wrestling, you would really enjoy this. Jeff Jarrett's Reign of Terror will be completely boring, but you have a roster that will keep you going. Oh, I can't forget to tell you that Vince Russo does show up. It wouldn't be a wrestling promotion without Vince Russo adding his shtick to it. He shows up and he creates a faction called SEX. Yes, that's really their name. And then he disappears. But he eventually does come back later on. It's Russo, so take this period for what it is. I think it's still worth a watch. After the Asylum years, they get their first TV deal with Fox. This would be the first year of Impact, and a year later they would get the Spike TV deal. And they would have that time spot for over a decade. And the rest is history, and we'll dive into that in another video that I want to call The History of TNA. We'll make it a series. Well, that's if you guys want to see it. So as always, check out my socials. They are linked in the description. And if you follow me on Twitter and send me a video request, I will make the video. So until the next video, stay safe and stay healthy, you main eventers.